And then I think another big part of that is this idea of in Shipibo they call it akinananti, or in Quechua aini, and it's usually translated as this idea of reciprocity. And in more of the indigenous language, what they would say is that the spirits of these plants, they require us to give something of ourselves. These medicines are going to give us so much more than we could potentially even imagine. But what am I willing to give it? What am I willing to do? Because so much of how we think of things is, oh, well, I'm just going to take a pill. I don't need to do anything, and it's going to get rid of my illness. And these plants aren't like that. It requires work. It requires us to really go in and to see, where have I been off? Where have I been contributing to this? Because so much of our illness is we love to point the finger. It was my mother's fault. It was my father's fault. It's my partner's fault. It's society's fault. It's the color of my skin's fault. It's the government's fault. It's everyone's fault but mine. And that can be triggering for some people to hear. And it's not to say the thing itself isn't real or it didn't happen. If I had a really rough childhood and my father was yelling at me and beating me, that's real. That has an impact. No one's going to take that away and say that was easy, you deserve that. Not at all. But the reality is that is real. That's a part of you now. But as long as we continue to hold on to that and in a sense, continue to live that by attaching to it, by feeding it, then we're doing the same thing to ourselves. And the only way that we overcome that is we have to be willing to let that go. And that requires forgiveness, that requires compassion, that requires understanding. And ultimately, that forgiveness, that letting go, it's not for the other person.
That's right.
Although that's going to have a tremendous impact on the other person, but it's for us. If we want to be free, we have to be willing to be free. And that requires going into that, understanding that, accepting that, and then seeing it's no longer serving us and letting it go. So, part of this kind of preparation for these ceremonies is really a reciprocity of, I'm going to be receiving these things from the plants. Am I willing to give something back? Am I willing to give up these things to really show that I'm ready? I'm willing to give. I'm kind of humbling myself. I'm coming open. I'm coming strong, ready, prepared. And that may sound strange to people, but in a lot of these traditional cultures, for example, I've worked a little with this Arhuaco gentleman. They're a group of people in the north of Colombia, in the Sierra Nevada. And it's really funny because if you ever ask him, like, what's the answer to my problem? And, you could have a million problems. But it's very funny because his answer is essentially always the same. He would say something like, you haven't made a payment.
Oh, wow.
And he's not talking about, you need to go and pay someone physical money, but it's this idea of reciprocity. Yeah. You haven't given anything back. You haven't done what you need to do to bring balance. That essentially the world is a place of balance. And every action we take can be an action that creates an imbalance, or it can be an action that creates a balance. But, we take so much, from the earth. We take air and we take water and we take food and these experiences and shelter. But what are we doing to give back? Mm-hmm. And it's much of this same mindset of like pointing the finger. It's this fault. It's this person's fault. It's this. But what am I doing to give back? What am I doing to create a balance? And so a big part, again, of that preparation, I think, is this idea of giving back. This idea of I'm willing to give in order to receive.